Brad, I
Uh,
told I told my friend Jimmy Mack about last week's performance, and he was thrilled. And he said, "I'd like to hear more." And I said, "I second that emotion." And here we are, eager to hear the second installment of how the Motown sound changed America. Our presenter is Dr. Jordan Van Hemert. You know him well. Today, he will take us aboard the Soul Train and take us to a higher ground. Don't be uptight. Everything is all right. Dr. Van Hemert is a nationally recognized composer, jazz saxophonist, and instructor. He holds a Bachelor of Music Education degree from Central Michigan University, a Master of Music degree from the University of Michigan, and a doctorate in musical arts from the University of Illinois. Dr. Van Hemert was assistant professor of music at Hope College from 2019 to 2021, where he taught saxophone and jazz studies. He founded and directed the Holland Concert Jazz Orchestra. You may have had the privilege and pleasure of attending his farewell concert last week. He will be missed. Why will we miss him, you ask? It's because Dr. Van Hemert is now living for the city of Columbus, Georgia. That may not put him on cloud nine, but being appointed Director of Jazz Studies at the Schwab School of Music at Columbus State University might. Dr. Van Hemert has fulfilled many commissions for jazz ensembles and wind chamber groups across the country. This spring, Big Round Records released his first album, and it is titled I Am Not a Virus. The music reflects his political consciousness and the pursuit of social justice. Following the release of the album, Dr. Van Hemert was heard saying, "I just want to celebrate." Dr. Van Hemert encourages us to ask questions at any time during his presentation. If you prefer, you can type your questions in the chat box, or you can call Beechwood 45789 and leave your question after the beep. Let's keep on trucking with Dr. Van Hemert's second presentation on the music from the Motor City. Dr. Van Hemert?
Good morning, everybody. Wow, my name is incorrect. I think that's from a meeting. Let me just quick rename myself so nobody gets confused. I have enough people mistaking my name for Jake anyway, and so I will kind of rename myself and make sure we're all squared away there. Okay, so good morning, everybody, and thank you all for being here. It's great to see you. To those of you who I got to see in person on Thursday, the 29th of July, it was just it was such a pleasure to see some of you and meet some of you in person for the first time. And thank you for attending that concert. It was a very special one for me. And I am overjoyed that the group will be continuing, albeit under different leadership. But I know they're going to do an excellent job. So today we have, whoops, that's the wrong share button. Today we're talking about, this is week 2. Surprise, we're still talking about how Motown changed America. I'm still Jordan Van Hemert. I'm still Director of Jazz Studies at the Columbus State University Schwab School of Music. And let's get going here. So first thing, just a couple reminders. So specifically, Motown is a style more than it is a place. Yes, it did come from Detroit. Yes, it was influenced by the culture and the music of Detroit. All of those things are beautiful. Stylistically, it refers to a specific marriage of R&B, jazz, soul, pop, and gospel. Features elaborate instrumentations. What we're really talking about here is we're talking about layers. So I don't know if you all have seen those big German chocolate cakes with 13 layers of sponge and some different chocolates between them. But that's kind of what Motown is. undeniable groove, focus on the backbeat and the bass line. Again, we talked about the tambourine accenting beats 2 and 4. We talked about the bass lines having a little bit more intricacy, and we're going to dive in a little bit to some of Motown's more popular anthems today, which also include vocal harmonies. Now, the vocal harmonies are part of those cake layers, okay? And while they don't distract from the melody, they merely serve to augment it, and they serve to say, okay, well, what are we doing here? Well, we have this amazing vocal melody line. And so what are we going to do? We're going to just add some stuff that helps that melody line to pop out a little bit. And so that's one of the things that they did. And so we also have hooks or catchy melodies and instrumental or vocal lines that are based on short figures or phrases that are called riffs. So with that being said, we are examining some various sounds of the Motor City, and we'll get into some older sounds as well as some newer sounds. And these newer sounds will show you how the music progressed from being what we would consider to be music of the Motown era to an evolution of the Motown label. All right. So that's what we kind of have in store. The first thing, the first thing I want to present is we have Diana Ross and the Supremes on the Ed Sullivan Show. Now, the Ed Sullivan Show, very interesting thing here. Unfortunately, I was not around on this planet in time for Ed Sullivan. And you know what? I really, really wish I wish I was, because he had some of the coolest musical acts live on television. And you know what? This is before auto-tune. This is before, you know, we can use technology to prop up the music as much. And so when you hear the Supremes, you're really hearing the Supremes. And believe me, that's one of the things that I really, really embrace about this. You know, I think that there are so many like YouTube internet sensations these days, and pardon me if I kind of sound a little bit curmudgeonly about this, but there are so many YouTube sensations these days, and my goodness, they are auto-tuned to death. And you know what? A little bit here and there, fine. But when you auto-tune somebody to death, is it really them singing anymore? I don't know. Diana Ross and the Supremes, you can't hurry love, and you frankly can't teach that level of talent. So let's check out You Can't Hurry Love from the Ed Sullivan Show.
Now with the Ray Block background, the Supremes open with You Can't Hurry Love, and then go into a medley of their big hit songs. So let's have a fine welcome for the Supremes.
I need love, to ease my mind. I need to find someone to call mine. But Mama said you can't hurry love. No, you just have to wait. She said love don't come easy. It's a game of a give and take. You can't hurry love. No, you just have to wait. She said just give it time. No matter how long it takes, but how many heartaches must I stand before I find the love to let me live again? Right now the only thing that keeps me hanging on when I feel my strength, yeah, it's almost gone. I remember Mama said, no, you just have to wait. She said love don't come easy. It's a game of give and take. How long must I wait? How much more can I take before loneliness will cause my heart to break? No, I can't bear to live my life alone. I grow impatient for a love to call my own. But when I feel that I can't go on, these precious words keep me hanging on. I remember Mama a give and take. You can't hurry love. No, you just have to wait. She said, trust me, no matter how long it takes, you can't hurry love.
Okay, let's go through this with a little bit more of an analytical ear here and talk about some of the developments in popular music at the time. So, with the advent of television and kind of this booming era of these live performances on shows, I won't say that radio became less important, because it's not. But television adds a new dimension to the music. What do I mean by that? Well, in this photo or this frieze of Diana Ross that you see here, her hair is all done up. It's epic. She's dressed to the nines. Those earrings are absolutely incredible. And her whole group, the Supremes, has this look that is very, very dressed up, and it's actually kind of analogous to Motown itself, because it's very polished. All of these dance routines, incredibly polished. These things are really important because as we kind of journey through popular music, it's more and more about the performance. And by that, I mean stage presence, the show of it all. And we really saw, and I'm just going to use jazz as an example. In the jazz era, well, in the early 40s and 50s, you had musicians who said, no, forget about this. This is all about the music. All right. I'm not here to put on a show for anybody. I'm here to just play my music, and it's going to be high art. So I don't really care what it looks like. I really just care, or frankly, I really don't care if the sound is appealing. I just care that it's the art that I'm meant to make. Motown, and in particular hard bop in the jazz era, which Motown borrows from a lot, and vice versa, really kind of walks away from that ideal. Motown is saying, okay, we got to polish this. We have to put on a show for people. We have to, and it's about the presentation. So here you have, these beautiful, even, down to the microphones. Ed Sullivan is ushering in this group of fantastic musicians. And that dress looks like it could blind somebody if it, if the light hit it the right or the wrong way, depending on your, point of view here. And so then we hear the tambourine on the backbeat.
But Mama said you can't hurry love. No, you just have to wait. She said love don't come easy. It's a game of a give and take.
Multi-camera kind of show, multi-camera angles, okay? And we're switching and toggling between cameras. It's huge. That's crazy. That's incredible production.
You can't hurry love. No, you just have to wait. She said trust me, Tara. No matter how long it takes, but how many heartaches must I stand before I find the love to let me live again. Right now, the only thing that keeps me.
Now, you hear a couple of different layers going on at the same time. You have the rhythm section in the background, and notice how everything kind of springs off of the bass line. Right? So even the horn orchestrations are all based on that bass riff. Okay. Now you have Diana Ross singing the melody, of course, but the Supremes are singing these kind of responsive oohs, and some of them are singing words, which is really fun. And then what they're doing is they're really responding to this melody. Whoops, come back here.
Just have to wait. She
And then you'll notice the saxophones, the horns, come back in with something that's very, very similar to those vocal lines. So everything is really kind of revolving around the voice.
How much more can I take? People know and yes, but it caused my heart to break. No, I came there to live my life alone. I grow impatient for a love to call my own. But when I feel that I can't go on, these precious words keep me hanging on. I remember Mama said, no, you just have to wait. She said, love don't come easy. It's a game of a give and take. You can't hurry love. No, you just have to wait. She said, love don't come easy. It's a game of a give and take. You can't. No love.
Now, something that is not really present in this, and this is a really, really big distinction between rock and roll and between Motown. You don't hear really any instrumental solos, like the saxophone isn't improvising at all. This is a really big distinction because in rock and roll, you have, for example, when we listened to Sister Rosetta in my rock and roll class, she was taking a solo at the middle. She broke it down on guitar. Not so here. This is a big distinguishing factor because this is kind of trending more in the line of popular music than it is with the improvised nature of rock and roll. And so this is a key kind of part. And actually, it's one way in which the kind of the music of this era, the Motown era, that is, really, really did affect popular music because you see a lot of these traits in popular music even of this day. Now, one big place where it did affect popular music is the R&B of the 1990s. So if you think a lot of like Boys to Men, for example, even to a degree, like some of those artists, like the boy bands, like 98 Degrees, the Backstreet Boys, they had a lot of this kind of stuff going on. That came from Motown. Without Motown, they would not have existed. All right.
Don't come easy, but I keep on waiting, anticipating for that soft voice to talk to me at night, for something there arms to hold me tight. I keep waiting. Ooh, you gotta give and take, but it ain't easy. It ain't easy. But Mama said, hey, hurry, love. No, you just have to wait. She said, love don't come easy. It's a game of a give and take. You can't hurry, love. No, you just have to wait. She said, trust me, darling. No matter how long it takes, you can't hurry, love.
Now, I want to draw attention to this ending here. This ending is classic big band ending. Okay. And so what you hear is a big, whoops, why do I keep doing that? A big 2-5-1 progression, which is very common in jazz. And then you hear this big finish with the trumpets and everything is, just completely, well, it's finishing on a very high note.
No, you just have to love.
That is very much stolen from the big band era and big band writing. Now, this other thing that happens that is also a nod to jazz, and what it is it's the bass line starts walking. It starts a walking bass line. So listen to the bass here. All of a sudden, when you start with a bass line like this, and then you go to this walking bass line, it's very sudden, grabs your attention.
She said, trust
Jordan,
Yeah, sure.
when I first heard that ending, my reaction was that they did that for Sullivan, and that's not how it was on the single. Is that correct? Or is
Yes. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that it wasn't like that on the single, but that ending is it is definitely a nod to jazz.
Yeah,
And you
it
know
fit TV,
what?
and it fit TV.
Yes, it does fit TV for sure. Because you want this big ending, you got to get people excited. Um, and you know, I wouldn't be surprised. Now, I don't know how this came about, but that you wanted this big splashy ending, and I bet that some producer was sitting back there and said, you know, what if we do this, and wrote it out for the band like all very suddenly. So yeah, absolutely. That, Brad, that's a really great observation. Very cool. So all sorts of influences in this You Can't Hurry Love by Diana Ross and the Supremes. All sorts of influences, and it's, you know, calling back a lot to gospel, to jazz, and then uh, these things are in later examples of music as well. So another example of a wonderful singer and kind of a group effort here is Martha Reeves and the Vandellas. So this is Dancing in the Streets. Again, the first thing you see is highly choreographed, highly choreographed. Okay, so Dancing in the Street. This is really interesting because the trend that this song points out is orchestrational complexity coupled with melodic simplicity and harmonic simplicity. So if you listen, the chords aren't really jumping around a lot. So, and the way that I like to kind of listen to that with my ears is listen to the baritone saxophone and the bass. So if you listen here, literally 4 measures, the chord has not changed. Let's keep listening. Holy cow, we're 37 seconds in and we got one of our first chord changes here. So my goodness, what this points out, so again, I have to use my jazz background as an example of this, but a lot of the time we're borrowing from jazz, we're borrowing from the blues, and you have at least a couple chords there. And in some cases in jazz, you have like a lot. But here we have our first chord change, as we go to the sweet music, there'll be music everywhere. There'll be swing. We're back. We're back at 45 seconds in. So that the chord changed for about 8 seconds. So what this is pointing out is large stretches of harmony. And this is kind of it's a big thing in modal jazz, actually. So if you listen to Miles Davis, Miles particularly, and we're talking like post kind of blue, although I guess this is kind of so what-ish. So yeah, it's kind of blue and later, but you have these long stretches of harmony over which the melody kind of just hangs out. Now, there are 2 ways to look at this. First of all, some people consider it a little bit boring. It's like, wow, you're just playing one chord, geez. But you can also kind of turn that on its head, and it is very stable, which is nice. All right. Ooh, another different chord. You are there, so come on, every guy, grab a girl, everywhere, around the world there'll be dance. Ooh, that was a nice brief harmonic voyage. But again, with very simplistic in its chords. But what's making the song fun then? Well, the melody line, come on, man, you gotta be kidding me. The melody line. The rhythm. So if they're gonna stay on one chord, they're not just going ba. It's everything is just accenting that backbeat and making that backbeat sound stronger. That's what makes you want to dance to it, or at least I guess I shouldn't speak for everybody here. It makes me want to dance to it. Sorry. I think the dance moves, I think I just saw an early version of the Macarena or something. Sorry about that. Keep napping. Down in New Orleans, in New York City, all we need is music, sweet music. There'll be music everywhere. There'll be swing and swaying and records playing, dancing in the street. Oh, it doesn't matter what you wear, just as long as you are there. So come on, every guy, grab a girl, everywhere, around the world they'll be dancing. They're dancing in the street. Now, come on. So one more thing that I want to point you to. So the bass is very important in Motown music. but bass-like instruments are also incredibly important. That's why when you play a Motown review as a saxophonist, everybody wants to get the baritone saxophone book. Everybody wants to be playing baritone saxophone because you're playing all those cool bass lines. And it is very stimulating for the musicians, and you feel very important because all of a sudden what you're doing is you're really moving the groove forward. And as a musician, like, that feels really good. So yeah, Martha and the Vandellas. So we also had groups like the Temptations, and well, I'll just let the Temptations speak, or rather sing, for themselves. I don't know what that first screen was, but whatever.
I've got sunshine on a cloudy day. When it's cold outside, I've got the month of May. I guess you say, what can make me feel this way? My girl, my girl, my girl, talking about my girl, my girl. I've got so much honey, the bees envy me. I've got a sweeter song than the birds in the trees. Well, I guess you say, what can make me feel this way? My girl, my girl, my girl, talking about my girl, my girl. Yeah, I don't need no money, fortune or fame. I got all the riches, baby, one man can claim. Well, I guess you say, what can make me feel this way? My girl, my girl, talking about my girl, my girl. I've got sunshine on a cloudy day with my girl. I've even got the month of May with my girl. Talking about my girl.
So this, and again, I don't know where those beginning and ending visuals came from, but probably not the Temptations. Anyway, so here you have an example of something old becoming something new, and that something old is doo-wop. Okay, so we're really hearing a lot of doo-wop in this, on the sound of the Temptations. And then actually what happens again is this is a really, really clear example of a precursor to the boy band era. And I will say again, there would not be Backstreet Boys or NSYNC without the Temptations. There just wouldn't be. Because they made this, and by this I mean this kind of presentation that you see in all of those music videos, the Boys to Men again. They made that cool. And the dance moves, the matching outfits, those super hip pocket squares. I mean, this was the look. This was it.
I've got sunshine
And I'm like, seriously, you know, sunshine, like gesturing to theoretically the sun, although they were indoors here, so that, you know, it doesn't make as much sense. I'm just kidding. You know, gesturing to the sun, they're just like, that's it. And you know, it's ironic because the Temptations should have made royalties on all of those dance moves by those 90s boy bands. They should have. Unfortunately, I don't think they did. But I digress. So we have here.
On a cloudy day.
Look at those kicks, right? And I don't mean shoes, I mean the actual kick.
On a cloudy day.
Yeah, they got moves.
When it's cold outside, I've got the month of May. I guess you say what can make me feel this way.
Check out that move.
Say what can
That is just, I mean, that's hip right there. That's like the rhythmic coordination. It's like if any of you all have young people in your lives that do like the dab thing, this is like the early version of the dab.
send to me. I've got a sweeter song than the birds in the trees. Well, I guess if you say what can make me feel this way, my dear, my dear.
Again, everything is accenting beats 2 and 4. Yeah, it's beautiful, beautiful music. The Temptations.
Jordan,
Yes, Brad, what's
a
up?
couple of questions we've got here.
Oh, okay, yeah.
First of all, these songs were all recorded in the mid 60s, right? Oops, it just moved on me, hang on. Were
Most of them,
videos
yeah.
being made that early? I noticed that Martha Reeves is wearing 3 costumes during Dancing in the Street.
Was there a question with that?
Well, just that were the videos being made that early, or is this strictly TV?
That's actually a really great question to which I'm not certain of the answer. But if I had to guess, I think it's mostly TV that's being broadcast. But I'll have to look that up and find out. That's a great question.
Yeah, they noticed the
Martha
costume
was-
changes.
What
Then a couple more technical kinds of questions.
Okay, all right.
Can you explain the walking bass idea a little more?
Sure, yeah. Let me wander over here. Sorry if any of you get motion sick from my camera. Let me wander over for my to my piano here. So, what we have is when you have a chord and you have, pardon my boxes, by the way, still unpacking over here. When you have, let's actually use this example that we had a few times ago. Well, wait, I think it might have been, oh, it was with Diana Ross. Yeah, that's right.
Now with the Ray block background, the Supremes open with You Can't Hurry Love, and then go into a medley of their big hit songs. So let's have a fine welcome for the Supremes.
So, a static bass line would be. Whoops, piano key stuck here. Where you're really using more rhythm than variation melodically in terms of the bass line. So really what this does is it moves the music forward, okay? it's really simple because if you see bass players, electric bass players primarily, they're just hanging out and striking the same note over and over again, and their fretting hand does not move. Now let's take a look here at this walking bass line. Oh my gosh, you've got to be kidding me, man. Okay.
I keep waiting. She said, love don't come easy. It's a game of a give and take. You can't hurry love. No, you just have to wait. She said, trust me, darling. No matter how long it takes, you can't hurry love.
So why we call it walking is because it's moving in quarter notes on all 4 beats. Like for example, when you hear it in jazz, instead of being like in jazz, you don't hear that. Instead, you hear. And so similarly, what you hear both in this song by the Supremes. You hear, right? And you hear this walking line at the end that goes to all quarter notes.
She said, trust me, darling, no matter how long it takes, you can't hurry
Or whatever that ending.
Okay, got it. We had another earlier question. You talked about auto-tune.
Yes.
And people like to know what auto-tune is, a little more about that.
Okay, so auto-tune is when you're for when you're a singer like me. And how many of you all know the term absolute versus relative location? Can anybody define those? Any geography experts in the room?
No.
Thanks for being honest, Jim. So, if you have an absolute location, you're talking about longitude, latitude, it's right there. All right. If you have a relative location, you can say things like, oh yeah, it's just on 7th, just past the, it's just past like Padnos. You're just past there. Or if you're talking about, relative location, it's like, oh yeah, you're looking north of Vanderbilt Charter Academy. So we can relatively say where things are, or we can absolutely say where things are. Pitch works the same way. I can say that is a B flat, but that's relative. And if I tell my students you're flat or you're sharp, that means that they're somewhere either north or south of that B flat. But pitch is an absolute location as well. And so A440, for example, is an absolute location. And so sometimes people get into the mode where they want to match that absolute location, because there comes a time in somebody's life when pitch being too relative means that they're going to sound very out of tune. And so what ends up happening is you have these people who are taking the pitch and mechanically and technologically altering it to be in that absolute location. Unfortunately, what this does is it makes it sound really, really fake because it is fake. It's a computer. It's not a human. The likelihood of somebody singing completely on pitch, even if they do have perfect pitch, which tells you the location, the absolute location of a pitch, the likelihood of reproducing that all the time is very slim. So auto-tune exists to get us closer to that location. I hope that answers the question about auto-tune. It's a computer program thing.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Brad?
Just a couple of comments.
Sure, okay, let's hear them.
First one, I think it's interesting that on the video of Martha and the Vandellas and the Temptations, they showed an integrated audience.
Yeah.
Like they wanted to emphasize that this music had crossed over to a broader audience.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I want to emphasize that point in that the music itself was more, was specifically geared toward integrated audiences. The pop nature of it allowed it to kind of fit in with what a lot of white audiences wanted to hear. That's the short version. Great point. Whoever brought that up, excellent point.
That was Sarah, I believe.
Hey, Sarah, great point.
And the last question I have, do the singers have music written in parts? Trio, quartet with falsetto, tenor, like the Temptations? I guess we're talking about the background singers. Do they?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So the answer is yes and no. Was it written out? A lot of the time, probably not. These singers are mostly using their backgrounds in the African American church and using their backgrounds in gospel. And so when you sing in those traditions, nobody says, all right, so we're going to be in B flat here, and the melody is an F. So, Martha, you're going to, sing the F here, and then everybody else is going to fill in the D and the B flat below that. Nobody's really saying that. They might alter something from a producer standpoint, but in reality, those harmonies are coming up from they're coming up from the African American church and gospel music. And so a lot of the time, it's not that they're improvised, but they aren't necessarily written down. Great question.
Okay, that's it for now.
Awesome. These are great questions and comments. I love hearing your questions and comments. You're never interrupting, and I never want to make it feel like you're interrupting the class. The questions, the comments, they all make the class better for everybody. So keep those coming. I absolutely love it. All right, so we're moving on from the Temptations and whatever the heck that is. So this is this is a great song. Please, Mr. Postman.
Oh yes, wait a minute, Mr. Postman. Wait, hey, Mr. Postman. Mr. Postman, look and see. Whoa, yeah. Please, Mr. Postman. Whoa, yeah. There must be some word today from my boyfriend so far away. Please, Mr. Postman, look and see. Is there a letter for me? I've been standing here waiting, Mr. Postman, so patiently. For just a card, for just a letter. Say he needs returning home to me. Please, Mr. Postman. Oh yeah. Please, Mr. Postman. Oh yeah. So many days you passed me by. You saw the tears standing in my eye. You wouldn't stop to make me feel better by leaving me a card or a letter. Please, Mr. Postman, look and see. Is there a letter, oh yeah, in your bag for me? You know it's been so long. Yes, since I heard from this boyfriend of mine. You better wait a minute. Whoa, you better wait a minute. Please, Mr. Postman. Wait a minute, Mr. Postman. Please check and see just one more time for me. Whoa, yes, wait a minute. You better wait a minute.
right, a couple of things to, oh shoot, my video is not enabled. Hold on one second. Ah, there we go. So a couple of things to point out here about the Marvelettes. So first of all, Marvelettes, great, love them. We are moving into an era where we're controlling things a little bit more with production, all right? And one of the things that's really, really obvious here is that we're controlling dynamics. That is how loud or soft the music is. So as you can see here, sometimes we don't necessarily know how to handle this vamp, and we fade out. Now, this is really, really critical and actually very helpful for radio, because it's something that happens on radio anyway, and so it really helps you transition from song to song. So that's one thing. Yeah, and so another thing we have here is a very simple background kind of figure. So it's just a chord. All right. Now, the thing that I want to point out here is that that is repetitive, and not only in harmony, the background parts are repetitive in their harmony, and the only thing that really kind of makes them interesting is the rhythm. So this is a very interesting, whoops, come on now. I wanted that to be a surprise. I wanted to put that in there just because of a joke that Louis made to me when I was at the concert on Thursday. But anyway. So the Marvelettes have this really cool sound that is definitely a nod to rhythm and blues. Okay, this is totally like straight up R&B. You just have multiple singers and such, and it's in the piano sound. Okay, it's in that piano comping rhythm actually. And then it's also in oh come on man, you're killing me. It's also in it's in the comping rhythms of the vocalists, the background vocalists. All right. So the Marvelettes really are kind of a throwback to classic R&B, and that's why we call Motown music a marriage of pop, R&B, soul, gospel, all these things, because it's really drawing on the ancestry of the music at that point. And it is not something that's like, oh yeah, cool, I have I have infinitely many chord changes, and here we're gonna no. We're really, really drawing on old school R&B here. So, the Marvelettes. All right, I had to mention Gladys Knight and the Pips. Okay, Midnight Train to Georgia, because that's where I am. And because Louis kind of inspired me to talk about it on Thursday. when I saw him and he made a remark that I would be maybe taking the 8 a.m. plane to Georgia instead of the midnight train. But anyway, I thought it was funny, and so I had to bring up Gladys Knight and the Pips. Here we go.
For the man, too much for the man, he couldn't make it. So he's leaving the life he's come to know. Ooh. He said he's going back to find, ooh, what's left of his world, the world he left behind not so long ago. He's leaving on that midnight train to Georgia. Leaving on the midnight train. Yeah. Said he's going back to a simpler place and time. Oh yes he is. Now be with him on that midnight train to Georgia. Leaving on that midnight train. I'd rather live in his world than live without him in mine. World is his and hers alone. He kept dreaming, ooh, that someday he'd be a star, a superstar, but he didn't get far. But he sure found out the hard way that dreams don't always come true. Oh no, So he pawned all his hopes, and he even sold his old car. Bought a one-way ticket back to the life he once knew. Oh yes he did. He said he would. Oh, he's leaving on that midnight train to Georgia. Yeah. Said he's going back to find, ooh, a simpler place and time. Oh, yeah. And I'm gonna be with him.
My bad. Come back, Gladys Knight and the Pips. Sorry about that.
The dreams don't always come true. Oh no. So he pawned all his hopes, and he even sold his old car. Bought a one-way ticket back to the life he once knew. Oh yes he did. He said he would. Oh, he's leaving on that midnight train to Georgia. Yeah. Said he's going back to find, ooh, a simpler place and time. Oh, yeah. And I'm gonna be with him on that midnight train to Georgia. I'd rather live in his world than live without him in mine. his world than live without him in mine.
All right. So, the midnight train to Georgia, Gladys Knight. Now, I want to point out something before one of you calls me on it. And it's that this is not Motown Records. But it does show just how influential the Motown Records sound was in soul music of this era. Okay. This is technically Buddha Records. It's 1973, all right? So Motown had been around for a minute, all right? And by a minute, I'm using that colloquially, it had been around for far longer than a minute, okay. Now, this song has many hallmarks of the great Motown hits. And it shows you that what we were doing, well, I say we, what was happening in Detroit was having a widespread influence around the country. In this song by Gladys Knight and the Pips, so a lot of people mistake it for being Motown Records. It was actually Buddha Records. So a lot of people are like, oh yeah, that's the Motown sound, because it is. But it is not Motown Records. You have a heavy backbeat right away. I imagine the drummer in some studio beating the living daylights out of that snare drum. Boom, 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 boom. You know, you get it. We have a big horn section.
LA proved too much for the man.
Too much for the man. He couldn't make it.
So he's leaving the life he's come to know. Ooh.
He said he's going.
He said he's going back to find.
Going back to find.
And then, of course, you have the Pips kind of in the background, giving those call and the answers, the responses to the call.
Ooh, what's left of his world? The world he left behind not so long ago.
Listen to that Hammond organ in the background.
Ooh, what's left of his world? The world he left behind not so long ago. He's leaving on that midnight train to Georgia.
Leaving on the midnight train.
Yeah, said he's got.
Now you have a strings coming in, right? Heavy orchestration here. It's all about the orchestration, but it's not so many things that we're like, oh my gosh, what's happening? I don't know.
Back
Going back to find.
to a simpler place and time.
Place that find.
Oh, yes, he is.
Be right by his side.
Now be with him
I know you will.
on that midnight train to Georgia.
Leaving on the midnight train.
I'd rather live in his world than live without him in mine.
World is
What's that? That iconic tambourine sound.
his. His and hers alone.
He kept dreaming,
Dreaming.
ooh, that someday he'd be a star.
Now, interesting thing I want to know. So this, come on.
Don't always come true. Oh, that someday he'd be a star.
A superstar, but he didn't get far.
That right there is a precursor to hip hop. Right there. It's a precursor to hip hop. Because you had all the time, you had it from, disc jockeys, radio hosts, as it were. And even in Gladys Knight and the Pips, you had that rhythmic speaking sound as a precursor to hip hop.
But he sure found out the hard way that dreams don't always come true. Oh no. So he pawned all his hopes and even sold his old car.
The use of the background vocals in harmony and in unison. So they're singing some things in unison, some things in harmony to fill out the texture.
Bought a one-way ticket back to the life he once knew. Oh yes he did. He said he would. I'm always leaving.
There's that horn section sound again.
On that midnight train to Georgia. Yeah. Said he's going back to find a simpler place and time. Oh, yeah. And I'm gonna be with him. On that midnight train to Georgia. I'd rather live in his world than live without him in mine. Oh, he's leaving on the midnight train to Georgia. Yeah. Ooh, yo. Said he's going back to find.
So this is not a Motown song per se. It would fit squarely within the genre. And also it was definitely inspired by the Motown classics of yesteryear.
Here's a thought-provoking question, just came in.
Sure.
Were there possible gospel elements in Midnight Train to Georgia, such as, oh yes, he did, and he said he would? Or are they something else?
As in gospel, as in the musical style, or are we talking about faith?
I think the question concerns he being the Lord as opposed to the man in the song.
Got it. That's a good question. That's a fantastic question. I think the thing about, allegory in popular culture, particularly as it is in books, music, and movies, one thing that I really like is that writers don't often come out and say it, but I think this one can kind of go either way. In most cases, though, I think a lot of people interpret that as the gentleman in the song. But that's a great question, and you know what? It is very thought-provoking because it's not an unheard of element, being that most Motown musicians were coming straight out of church, So great question. Do we have any more questions here, Brad?
I have one more.
Awesome.
I kind of miss not seeing the pips on that actually, but this kind of relates to that. The question is, are the dance-like steps, arm movements, individually extemporaneous? I think they're talking about improv with regard to the dancers.
I think they're pretty heavily choreographed in that Motown is known for being really buttoned up and very much polished. So I would think that they would be very choreographed, and if not choreographed, very heavily produced. So in other words, if they are somewhat improvisatory, they're all moving kind of in unison. They're all moving in ways that are a little bit more polished than what you might think of as improvisatory? Great question.
If I may add to that,
Sure.
this is Louis. My memories suggest that that Motown Records had hired people to teach dance moves to these acts.
Yes.
Many of these people did not have the background. They were taught that you couldn't teach them the talent to sing necessarily, but they were taught how to perform on stage. They were choreographed, as you say, they were taught dance moves. And I believe that there was also a woman on staff who taught the female singers how to behave on stage and off stage, as well as they were touring around the country.
Absolutely.
Suggest a very polished act.
Maxine Powell.
What was that, David?
Maxine Powell was the
Mm-hmm.
and Charlie Atkins.
Yeah. So yes, Louis, a really great point there. Absolutely, very helpful to the to the sound and shape of the label. All right, so of course the classic Marvin Gaye, "What's Going On?" Actually, I want to save this for next time. I want to launch into some question and answer, mostly because these last couple are about mainly the kind of the reach and scope of Motown Records. And so I want to save that for next time, actually. So that being said, let's launch into some questions, some answers. And I love hearing your comments and questions and such come in as the presentation goes along, but let's have a little bit more of a structured time for it.
I've got another question. I'm going back to that auto tone you talked about.
Yeah, auto tune. What's up, Jim? Yeah.
Does that mean that when we're hearing that, we're not hearing their true voice, or it's augmented somehow, even if it's a live broadcast?
That's correct. It is an augmentation of the voice, and a lot of the time when you hear, especially modern singers, you'll be hearing some variation of auto-tune, unless of course it's super live, in which case they might not be able to grab it on the fly and make it sound a little bit more natural.
So people may not have as good a voice or be as talented as they might appear to be?
That is correct, sir.
Do you have any examples you'd care to share?
Sure. Give me a second here. Let's take a look here.
While Jordan looks at that, I had an earlier comment is in terms of a recommendation.
Right now, and I'm going to show you this little trick on how you can lower your gas bill every time you.
Okay.
And that was someone suggested the movie Cadillac Records on Netflix. It was very,
Somebody suggested what now? Sorry.
the movie Cadillac Records
Mm-hmm.
on Netflix, saying it's very entertaining, enlightening, very well produced, and topical. Well, that concludes all the comments we've had today.
Terrific. Let me see if this is a good example of auto-tune here.
Keep talking way too much. Say I should give them up. Can't hear them now, 'cause I've been on but I wish I can't hear them all time.
Yep. I found, let's see, a few. All right, let's see. All right, I'm gonna share my screen here and we're gonna listen to some auto-tune. All right, so here we go. Oh, I don't think I'm sharing sound a second. Oh. All right, I just lost my Muted. Hey, Brad, can you say something, please? Well, you're also muted, so
No, I'm back. How's that?
that's better. Okay, hold on 1 second here. All right. So let's try this again, shall we?
Not hearing it.
That's weird.
And although time may take us into different places, I will still be patient with you. And if you feel you're sinking, I will jump right over into cold, cold water for you. And although time may take us into different places, I will still be patient with you.
So there you go. It's a little bit more raw on the non-auto-tuned example. There are countless comparisons like that on YouTube, and it is a little bit harrowing to hear some of that.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I have a technical question.
Sure.
It takes us back to the ending, the coda of the Supremes' You Can't Hurry Love.
Yep.
You mentioned that it was analogous to a big band ending, and you mentioned that it's a 2-5-1 ending. Can you explain that for us, please?
Sure. Let me wander over to my piano again, because it's just easier to explain this stuff on piano. So 2-5-1. So we have on the piano in jazz, so we have, and maybe I'll see if you can see my hands a little bit more. So we have in Western music, the major scale. So if you've ever heard the song from The Sound of Music, Doe, a deer, a female deer, that's what that's talking about, the notes of the major scale. Now, if we build chords on all of those notes, that gives us kind of the basis of our Western system of harmony. So in other words, we can take each of those notes and build a chord on top of it. In music, particularly in jazz, we identify those notes not by names so much, but by numbers. And the numbers tell us the chord's function. So, whoops, sorry about that. Here's the 1 chord. I often refer to this as home, like our home base, okay? Then we have 2, we've journeyed somewhere. 3, we're still journeying. 4 is kind of on a journey, but 4, you'll notice, is used all the time when we go, whoops. We call that the amen chord. You'll hear your friendly neighborhood organists play that a lot. Then we have 5, the dominant. 6, 7, and so on. In Western music, we use 2, 5, and 1 a lot. 2 is what we call predominant. I like to think, and then 5 is dominant because it's very tense because it includes this note. So, whoops. And this note really wants to go here. But the dominant is a suspension of this. it really, really wants to go here, but we don't let it until we want it to. So it's like we're home, and then we leave our house, and then we're very far away, but we're almost somewhere near there, and then we're back home again. Jazz does this all the time, particularly bebop. So the 2-5-1 progression is at the heart of a lot of jazz and improvised music. And that carries over into Motown. And what it does is it colors the harmony. Whoops. And creates a creative way for us to get home. It's like a map. That's the 2-5-1 progression. I hope some of that made sense.
Jordan, which one is home? The one you called home.
The home is the major one. So
It's
it's
the one.
Yep.
Okay.
So it's where we start here.
Got it.
That's
Thanks.
home. Yep. And notice, even when we have our amen cadence, we're going back home. All right, I think we have time for maybe one more question, perhaps two.
Well, I put one in the chat. I don't know if it was seen, and that is, I wonder if you would mention or have seen a documentary, and it was based on a book. I think the Standing in the Shadows of Motown. That was a book about and documentary about the Funk Brothers, who were
Yes.
the backup musicians in Detroit and
Yeah.
some of LA.
So the Funk Brothers are really part of the Motown sound. And I would say that, yeah, they back up, but them as session musicians, they made that sound happen, because having a tight rhythm section who has played with each other will give you a certain sound. So yeah, the Funk Brothers really kind of made that happen as session players. So thanks for bringing that up, Michael.
Okay, I'm going to mention one other thing. What I brought up last week, if you recall, Aretha Franklin. That's one other one that wasn't a Motown label.
Yeah, so she was never on Motown Records, but Berry Gordy always said that she was part of the family. So she is one of those who is not specifically on Motown Records, but in her sound, you can hear Motown's influence. It's kind of a fun thing about how far-reaching the influence of Motown is, and I'll talk about her a little bit more specifically next week when we talk about the far-reaching Motown sound. All right, I think we got time for maybe one more.
I just want to clarify, Gladys Knight and the Pit did record that album Imagination for Buddha Records, but they had been Motown recording artists before that in the 60s.
Right.
Okay.
All right, thanks everybody. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next week as we close out talking about the far-reaching nature of the Motown sound.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Jordan. A wonderful way to spend the morning. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
I want to stop recording.